My ex told everyone I was dangerous after I left, so I released audio proof, took legal action, and got sole custody of our son quietly. I'm a 29-year-old dad, and this story begins the day I finally left my ex. People always think the hardest part of leaving is packing up your stuff, or saying goodbye, or figuring out where you'll sleep that night. But for me, the hardest part was convincing myself that I wasn't crazy, that the life I had been living wasn't normal. For years, I thought love meant walking on eggshells, keeping my voice low, and making sure my son didn't hear the screaming matches that always started over nothing. She had a way of controlling me that wasn't obvious to outsiders. If I didn't answer a text in 5 minutes, she'd accuse me of cheating. If I spent money on groceries instead of the brand she liked, she'd rage for hours. Once, she smashed a plate in front of our son because I bought the wrong cereal. And every time I told myself, it's not that bad. It could be worse. But inside, I knew it was breaking me. One night, after another argument where she called me worthless in front of my boy, I tucked him into bed and he whispered, "Daddy, why are you always sad?" That was it. That was the moment. His little voice cut through years of denial like a knife. I realized if I stayed, he'd grow up thinking this was normal, that love meant fear and silence. So the next morning, I packed a bag. Just a small one. A few clothes, my son's favorite toy, and enough cash to get by for a few days. My hands shook as I turned the doorknob, not because I was scared of leaving, but because I knew leaving meant war. I thought walking away would finally bring peace. I couldn't have been more wrong. It only took a couple of weeks for me to realize that leaving wasn't the end of the nightmare, it was the beginning of a new one. My ex didn't just let me go. She started planting seeds, spreading stories so twisted I barely recognized myself in them. She told the neighbors I was unstable, that she feared for her safety. She told her friends that I had violent outbursts. She even hinted to my family that I might not be safe to leave alone with our son. At first, I brushed it off. I thought, they know me, they'll see through it. But slowly, I noticed the shift. Friends who used to text me daily stopped responding. A coworker who had always joked around with me suddenly looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be alone in the break room. One night, my sister called and said, "Look, I don't know what's true or not, but she's saying some really scary stuff." My heart sank. It was working. The worst moment came at my son's daycare. His teacher pulled me aside one afternoon, her voice cautious. "Is everything okay at home? Your ex mentioned some concerns." I felt my face go hot, shame burning even though I'd done nothing wrong. It was like the ground had been pulled out from under me suddenly. I was the one on trial in everyone's eyes. I started to feel paranoid. Every time I walked into a grocery store, I wondered if people were looking at me differently. Every time I dropped my son off, I felt eyes on me, waiting for me to slip up. And the thing about lies, if you repeat them enough, they start to stick. I had left to find peace, but somehow, she had turned the whole world against me. And the worst part was I had no idea how far she was willing to take it. If the whispers from neighbors and coworkers hurt, nothing could have prepared me for what came next, my own family turning their backs on me. My mom called one night, her voice tight and clipped. She said, "Your ex told us some things. And until we know the truth, maybe it's better if you don't come around." Just like that. I was cut off from the people who were supposed to know me better than anyone. I found out later that I wasn't invited to my cousin's birthday party. My ex had messaged my aunt directly, spinning more lies about me being unstable and dangerous. When I confronted my aunt, she said, "We just don't want any trouble." You understand, right? Trouble. That's what I was now a problem to be avoided. The final blow came from my best friend. We'd known each other since high school, gone through breakups, dead-end jobs, even losing his dad together. He was the one person I thought would always have my back. Then one night, he sent me a short text. "Man, if it's true, I can't be around you." No explanation. No phone call. Just that. I stared at the screen for hours, the words blurring. My chest tight. It felt like someone had stolen my life and replaced it with a distorted version where I was the villain. And no matter how loud I wanted to scream my innocence, nobody wanted to listen. One by one, the people I leaned on fell away, leaving me with nothing but silence. And silence, when you're already breaking inside, is the loudest betrayal of all. I thought losing friends and family was the worst it could get, but then the envelope came. Thick, official, with my name stamped across the front. My stomach dropped the second I saw it. Inside were court papers she was filing for full custody of our son. Her reasoning: I was dangerous, the very word she'd been planting in. Everyone's mind was now being used in black and white against me. I sat at the kitchen table. The documents spread out like a battlefield I hadn't agreed to fight on. My hands shook as I read lines about emotional instability and risk to the child. None of it true, but all of it terrifying. Because in custody court, perception matters as much as facts. And she'd been crafting this perception for months. I couldn't afford a lawyer, not really. But what choice did I have? I pulled from my savings, maxed out a credit card, and signed a retainer with a family attorney. Every hour he billed felt like a nail in my financial coffin, but losing my son wasn't an option. I'd rather be broke than absent from his life. The stress was crushing. I stopped sleeping, barely ate, and lived with the constant fear of a judge looking me in the eye and deciding I wasn't fit to be a father. My son would ask, "Daddy, why are you so tired?" And I couldn't even explain the weight pressing on me. But as scared as I was, I made myself a promise. If she wanted to drag me into war, I wouldn't stoop to her level. I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't smear her name. I'd fight with nothing but the truth and whatever strength I had left. If she wanted war, then fine, I'd fight clean. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, right when I was trying to keep my head down at work. An unfamiliar number flashed on my phone, and when I answered, the voice on the other end introduced themselves as a caseworker from Child Protective Services. My chest tightened instantly. She said, calm and professional, "We've received a report and need to schedule a home visit. It involves an allegation of physical harm to your son." For a second, the room spun. My mind couldn't process the words. Physical harm. I repeated, my voice breaking. She confirmed it. My ex had told them I hit our son. Completely fabricated. A lie so vile, it left me numb. I stumbled outside, barely able to breathe, leaning against the brick wall of the building as coworkers glanced at me like I'd lost my mind. When I hung up, I collapsed into my car seat and sobbed. Full-body, gut-wrenching sobs I hadn't let out in years. I kept imagining the knock at my door, the caseworker stepping inside, scribbling notes, maybe even deciding I was unfit. One lie, that's all it could take. My entire world could be ripped away. That night, I barely looked my boy in the eye when I tucked him in. He hugged me and said, "I love you, Daddy," and I had to bite my lip so I wouldn't break down again. What if this was the last week I'd get to hear that? What if she actually succeeded in erasing me from his life? For the first time, I wasn't just afraid of losing custody. I was afraid of losing everything: my freedom, my identity, my son. For the first time, I thought I might actually lose my boy. A few days later, I was unpacking my son's backpack after daycare. Usually, it was just crumpled drawings and half-empty juice boxes. But that night, something heavier clunked at the bottom. I pulled it out, and froze it was a small digital voice recorder. My ex must have slipped it in to catch me saying something incriminating, but she forgot to take it back. My stomach knotted as I turned it over in my hands, debating whether I even wanted to know what was on it. Curiosity won. I pressed play. At first, there was nothing but static and muffled shuffling. Then her voice came through, sharp and clear. "No, sweetie, you have to say Daddy hit you, remember? You have to tell them Daddy gets mad and hurts you." My breath caught. My son's little voice followed, confused and shaky. "But Daddy didn't hit me." She snapped back, "Don't argue. Just say it. Do you want Mommy to be mad?" My hands trembled so badly, I almost dropped the device. I listened to the whole thing, every word like a knife to the chest. My son, begging, "I don't want to lie," and her pushing harder, manipulating him, weaponizing his innocence. It was worse than anything I'd imagined. I replayed it 3 times, my heart pounding, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just hearsay or her word against mine. This was her, on record, coaching our child to destroy me with a lie. It was undeniable, damning, raw, and in that moment. Through the tears and shaking, one thought crystallized in my mind. I realized I had the smoking gun, the first instinct that surged through me was to call her and scream, to shove the recorder in her face and demand how she could do this to our son. But I forced myself to stop. If I exploded now, she'd twist it into more evidence that I was unhinged. So instead, I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I stayed quiet to her. It looked like her lies were working. I kept my head low, didn't argue, didn't push back. I let her believe I was cornered, drowning under the weight of her accusations. Meanwhile, every text she sent, every voicemail dripping with manipulation, I saved. I started keeping a log, dates, times, exactly what was said during every visitation exchange. My phone became an archive of her cruelty. When I finally sat down with my lawyer and played the audio, he leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. This changes everything," he muttered. He played it again, shaking his head in disbelief. "Do you realize what you're holding? This isn't just a defense. This is leverage. For the first time since this nightmare began." I felt the tide shifting. I walked out of that office clutching my folder of evidence. Heart pounding not from fear, but from something sharper. Resolve. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was preparing to fight back, calmly, methodically, with the truth on my side. She thought she had me backed into a corner. She had no idea I was already building my counterattack. The day of the custody hearing, my stomach felt like it was made of lead. I sat at the defendant's table in a stiff suit that didn't feel like it belonged to me. My hands clenched so tightly under the desk that my knuckles ached. Across the room, she walked in with a practiced fragility, iced tissues already in hand. When she took the stand, it was like watching an actress perform a role she'd rehearsed 100 times. She cried. She told the judge how terrified she was of me, how she had endured years of intimidation, how she feared for our son's safety every single day. Her voice shook at all the right moments, and when she dabbed her eyes with a tissue, I could see some of the people in the gallery nodding, sympathetic. The judge leaned forward, pen scratching notes, and my heart sank. For a terrifying moment, I thought it was working, that all the lies, all the poison she'd spread, had finally solidified into her truth. I sat silent, staring at the wood grain of the table, forcing myself not to interrupt. Every word she spoke stabbed at me, but I kept my face still, my posture calm. My lawyer had warned me, don't react. Let her bury herself. So I swallowed the fire building in my chest and waited. When she finished, the courtroom hung in heavy silence. My pulse thundered in my ears as the judge turned to my side. My lawyer rose slowly, buttoned his jacket, and glanced at me. Then he faced the bench and said, "Clear and steady, Your Honor, with the court's permission. We'd like to play a recording." My ex froze, her eyes narrowing in panic as he reached into the folder and pulled out the device. And then, my lawyer pressed play. The first few seconds of static filled the courtroom. And then her voice cut through sharp, commanding, unmistakable. "No, sweetie, you have to say Daddy hit you, remember? You have to tell them Daddy gets mad and hurts you." The sound of my son's small, trembling voice followed. "But Daddy didn't hit me." His words were fragile, almost pleading. And then came her reply, cold, impatient, dripping with manipulation. "Don't argue. Just say it. Do you want Mommy to be mad?" The room froze. You could feel the collective breath of everyone present being sucked out at once. The same people who had nodded along with her crocodile tears now stared at her in stunned silence. The judge leaned forward, his pen stilled mid-note. I watched as his face shifted from sympathy to something harder. Sharper outrage, barely masked behind professional restraint, my ex's cheeks drained of color. She fidgeted with the tissue in her hands, eyes darting like a trapped animal. For the first time, her performance cracked. I kept my gaze steady, even though inside my chest was hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. The judge finally spoke, his tone clipped and stern. "I've heard enough." Those words landed like thunder. My lawyer glanced at me, the faintest nod of reassurance. And I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. She had spent months painting me as dangerous, unfit, abusive. But now, in a single moment, she had undone herself. She had buried herself with her own voice. The courtroom was never the same after that recording ended. The judge's face was stone. His voice clipped as he ordered an immediate investigation into her conduct. "This court does not tolerate manipulation of a child," he said firmly. In that moment, everything she had built, every lie, every rumor, every smear she had whispered into willing ears began to collapse. Temporary custody was pulled from her hands on the spot. Visitation suspended. My son would stay with me until the investigation concluded. I remember glancing at her, then her wide eyes, her shaking hands, and for the first time in years, I wasn't the one afraid. She was, but I didn't stop there. With my lawyer's help, I filed a defamation case. Every rumor she had spread, every message she'd sent painting me as a monster, became part of a thick folder of evidence. The same lies that had once isolated me now worked against her in black and white print. It wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my reputation, and making sure my son would never again be used as a weapon. Word spread quickly through our families. The same relatives who had cut me off, the ones who whispered behind my back, suddenly fell silent. No calls, no apologies, just quiet. Her family, once so loud in their judgment, disappeared into the background. Nobody wanted to defend her now that the truth was out. I thought about the nights I'd cried alone, the texts from friends who walked away, the shame I carried like a scar. And now, with a single piece of evidence, the narrative had flipped. She had tried to destroy me. But in the end, she had destroyed herself. Weeks later, after endless hearings and stacks of reports, the judge delivered his ruling. I'll never forget the sound of those words. Sole custody will be granted to the father. The mother's actions constitute emotional abuse and deliberate manipulation of the child. My knees nearly gave out right there in the courtroom. After months of living in fear, after nights wondering if I'd lose my boy forever, the fight was finally over. Relief washed over me so completely it almost hurt. I looked over at my son, sitting quietly with my mom in the back row, clutching his toy car. He smiled when our eyes met, and that was it. That single smile made every sleepless night, every lawyer bill, every tear worth it. For the first time in months, I could breathe without the weight of dread pressing down on my chest. I thought back to all the moments I wanted to explode, to scream in her face, to defend myself with anger. But I hadn't. I had kept my head down, documented everything, trusted the process, and let the truth speak louder than any outburst ever could. It was a lesson I never wanted to learn this way. But I had. Sometimes survival isn't about fighting fire with fire, it's about holding steady while the flames burn themselves out. I left the courthouse that day not just with custody, but with something deeper proof to myself that I wasn't weak for walking away or broken for being silent. I didn't win by being loud. I won by being patient. In the months that followed, I watched from a distance as her world unraveled. The social circle that once propped her up evaporated overnight. Friends who had believed her lies stopped calling. Neighbors stopped waving. Even her own family went silent. The woman who once thrived on attention now stood alone, grasping at the ruins of the story she had spun. Every court date drained her, more legal fees piled up, her reputation in shambles. She tried to rebuild the narrative, but no one wanted to listen anymore. Meanwhile, my life with my son slowly became something simple and beautiful. We moved into a modest apartment where laughter replaced shouting. Evenings were filled with puzzles on the floor, burnt grilled cheese sandwiches, and bedtime stories that ended with him asleep on my chest. For the first time, the air in our home felt light. I no longer worried about someone recording my every move, twisting my every word. It was just us, peaceful, steady, free. People sometimes asked me if I felt vindicated, if I enjoyed watching her spiral. The truth? I didn't need to. My victory wasn't about her downfall. It was about my son sleeping safely in his bed without fear. It was about waking up without dread. It was about rebuilding myself into a man who no longer flinched at shadows of lies. She wanted to destroy me. But in the end, she destroyed only herself. My revenge wasn't loud, violent, or messy. It was quiet, legal, and final. And I realized something as I tucked my boy in one night, his small hand clutching mine as he drifted to sleep. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge, it's freedom.